day, everybody. It is the Desert Viking. And today we are going to begin our first practical application of the Builder's Workshop. And what we are going to be delving into today is this book right here, the Kybalion. The Kybalion was written in 1908, and it goes over the Hermetic principles and philosophies. And that is the point of why we're going to start here. We are answering the question, or we are addressing the question that I get so often. Where do we start? There's so much. It's like a fire hose. Where do you even start? And the answer that I give to anyone is, you start today with the first step. And why I've chosen the Kybalion as our start is simply that this is getting back to the root. This is getting back to one of my cornerstones, which is Hermetic Philosophy. Everything that we deal with in the woo-woo stems from Hermetic Philosophy. So, to me, it seems like the logical place to begin our exploration. There are other Hermetic doctrines and philosophies that we can look into that we may. I've chosen the Kybalion. It is probably the most recent because a lot of the writings of Hermes Trismegistus come from antiquity or biblical times, and I didn't want to start with that. I wanted to start with something a little bit more modern. Not that 1908 is exactly yesterday, but it's modern enough, relatively speaking. So how this is going to work is essentially I'm going to read. So you can turn the monitor off, you can go look at something else, you can have this on in the background, however you want to do it. We're going to read, and we're going to digest the words that we are hearing, and then you're going to go away afterwards and think about it. Think about everything we've talked about. Today I'm going to read the foreword in chapter 1. It's not a whole lot. I don't know how long it's going to take. It shouldn't take a great deal of time, but our goal, again, listen to what you're hearing, and then I want you to go away and think about it. And that's really how I approach this entire subject matter. You read a little bit, and then you go and think about it for a while. If you try to digest a bunch at once, it'll be more difficult. Okay. So thank you for coming along on this journey with me. Let us begin with the Kybalion. This is written by the three initiates, which was, they believe, actually a single person, but I'm going to read this person's introduction, and we're going to move into chapter 1. Introduction. We take great pleasure in presenting to the attention of students and investigators of the secret doctrines this little work based upon the world-old Hermetic teachings. There has been so little written upon this subject, notwithstanding the countless references to the teachings in the many works upon occultism, that the many earnest searchers after the arcane truths will doubtless welcome the appearance of this present volume. The purpose of this work is not the enunciation of any special philosophy or doctrine, but rather it is to give the student a statement of the truth that will serve to reconcile the many bits of occult knowledge that they may have acquired, but which are apparently opposed to each other, and which often serve to discourage and disgust the beginners in the study. Our intent is not to erect a new temple of knowledge, but rather to place in the hands of the student a master key, with which he may open the many inner doors in the temple of mystery through the main portals he has already entered. There is no portion of the occult teachings possessed by the world which have been so closely guarded as the fragments of the Hermetic teachings, which have come down to us over the tens of centuries, which have elapsed since the lifetime of its great founder, Hermes Trismegistus, the scribe of the gods, who dwelt in old Egypt in the days when the present race of men was in its infancy. Contemporary with Abraham, and if the legends be true, an instructor of that venerable sage, Hermes was and is the great central sun of occultism, whose rays have served to illuminate the countless teachings which have been promulgated since his time. All the fundamental and basic teachings embedded in the esoteric teachings of every race can be traced back to Hermes. Even the most ancient teachings of India undoubtedly have their roots in the original Hermetic teachings. From the land of the Ganges, many advanced occultists wandered to the land of Egypt, and sat at the feet of the master. From him they obtained the master key, which explained and reconciled our divergent views, and thus the secret doctrine was firmly established. From other lands also came the learned ones, all of whom regarded Hermes as the master of masters, and his influence was so great that in spite of the many wanderings from the path on the part of the centuries of teachers in these different lands, there may still be found a certain basic resemblance and correspondence which underlies the many and often quite divergent theories entertained and taught by the occultists of those different lands today. The student of comparative religions will be able to perceive the influence of the Hermetic teachings in every religion worthy of the name, now known to man, whether it be a dead religion or one in full vigor in our own times. There is always certain correspondence in spite of the contradictory features, and the Hermetic teachings act as the great reconciler. The life work of Hermes seems to have been in the direction of planting the great seed truth, which has grown and blossomed in so many strange forms, rather than to establish a school of philosophy which would dominate the world's thought. Nevertheless, the original truths taught by him have been kept intact in their original purity by a few men each age, who, refusing great numbers of half-developed students and followers, followed the Hermetic custom and reserved their truth for the few who were ready to comprehend and master it. From lip to ear, the truth has been handed down among the few. There have always been a few initiates in each generation, in the various lands of the earth, who kept alive the sacred flame of the Hermetic teachings, and such have always been willing to use their lamps to relight the lesser lamps of the outside world, when the light of truth grew dim, and clouded by reason of neglect, and when the wicks became clogged with foreign matter. There were always a few to tend faithfully the altar of the truth upon which was kept alight the perpetual lamp of wisdom. These men devoted their lives to the labor of love, which the poet has so well stated in his lines. "Oh, let not the flames die out, cherished age after age in its dark cavern, in its holy temples cherished. Fed by pure ministers of love, let not the flames die out." These men have never sought popular approval, nor numbers of followers. They are indifferent to these things, for they know how few there are in each generation who are ready for the truth, or who would recognize it if it were presented to them. They reserve the strong meat for men, while others furnish the milk for babes. They reserve their pearls of wisdom for the few elect who recognize their value and who wear them in their crowns, instead of casting them before the materialistic vulgar swine, who would trample them in the mud and mix them with their disgusting mental food. But still these men have never forgotten or overlooked the original teachings of Hermes regarding the passing on the words of truth to those ready to receive it, which teachings is stated in the Kybalion as follows: "Where fall the footsteps of the master? The ears of those ready for his teachings open wide." And again, "When the ears of the students are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom." But their customary attitude has always been strictly in accordance with the other Hermetic aphorisms. Also in the Kybalion, the lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. There are those who have criticized this attitude of the Hermeticists, and who have claimed that they did not manifest the proper spirit in their policy of seclusion and reticence. But a moment's glance back over the pages of history will show the wisdom of the masters, who knew the folly of attempting to teach to the world that which it was neither ready or willing to receive. The Hermeticists have never sought to be martyrs, and have, instead, sat silently aside with a pitying smile on their closed lips, while the heathen raged noisily about them, in their customary amusement of putting to death and torture the honest but misguided enthusiasts who imagined that they could force upon a race of barbarians the truth capable of being understood only by the elect who had advanced along the path. And the spirit of persecution has not as yet died out in the land. There are certain Hermetic teachings which, if publicly promulgated, would bring down upon the teachers a great cry of scorn and revilement from the multitude, who would again raise the cry of "Crucify, crucify." In this little work we have endeavored to give you an idea of the fundamental teachings of the Kybalion, striving to give you the working principles, leaving you to apply them yourselves, rather than attempting to work out the teachings in detail. If you are a true student, you will be able to work out and apply these principles. If not, then you must develop yourself into one, for otherwise the Hermetic teachings will be as words, words, words to you. The three initiates. Chapter 1. The Hermetic Philosophy. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of the understanding. The Kybalion. From old Egypt have come the fundamental esoteric and occult teachings which have so strongly influenced the philosophies of all races, nations, and people for several thousand years. Egypt, the home of the pyramids and the Sphinx, was the birthplace of the hidden wisdom and mystic teachings. From her secret doctrine all nations have borrowed: India, Persia, Chaldea, Media, China, Japan, Assyria, ancient Greece, and Rome. And other ancient countries partook liberally at the feast of knowledge which the hierophants and masters of the land of Isis so freely provided for those who came prepared to partake of the great store of mystic and occult lore, which the masterminds of that ancient land had gathered together. In ancient Egypt dwelt the great adepts and masters who have never been surpassed, and who seldom have been equaled, during the centuries that have taken their processional flight since the days of the great Hermes. In Egypt was located the great lodge of lodges of the mystics. At the doors of her temple entered the neophytes, who afterwards, as hierophants, adepts, and masters, traveled to the four corners of the world, carrying with them the precious knowledge which they were ready, anxious, and willing to pass on to those who were ready to receive the same. All students of the occult recognize the debt that they owe to those venerable masters of that ancient land. But among these great masters of ancient Egypt there once dwelt one of whom masters hailed as the Master of Masters. This man, if man indeed he was, dwelt in Egypt in the earliest days. He was known as Hermes Trismegistus. He was the father of the occult wisdom, the founder of astrology, the discoverer of alchemy. The details of his life story are lost to history, owing to the lapse of the years, though several of the ancient countries disputed with each other in their claims to the honor of having furnished his birthplace, and this thousands of years ago. The date of his sojourn in Egypt, and that his last incarnation on this planet, is not now known, but it has been fixed at the early days of the oldest dynasties of Egypt, long before the days of Moses. The best authorities regard him as a contemporary of Abraham, and some of the Jewish traditions go so far as to claim that Abraham acquired a portion of his mystic knowledge from Hermes himself. As the years rolled by after his passing from this plane of life, tradition recording that he lived 300 years in the flesh, the Egyptians deified Hermes and made him one of their gods under the name of Thoth. Years after, the people of ancient Greece also made him one of their many gods, calling him Hermes, the god of wisdom. The Egyptians revered his memory for many centuries, yes, tens of centuries, calling him the scribe of the gods, and bestowing upon him distinctively his ancient title, Trismegistus, which means the thrice great, the great great, the greatest great. In all the ancient lands, the name of Hermes Trismegistus was revered, the name being synonymous with the font of wisdom. Even to this day, we use the term hermetic in the sense of secret, sealed so that nothing can escape, and this by reason of the fact that the followers of Hermes always observed the principle of secrecy in their teachings. They did not believe in casting pearls before swine, but rather held to the teaching milk for babes, meat for strong men, both of which maxims are familiar to readers of the Christian scriptures, but both of which have been used by the Egyptians for centuries before the Christian era. And this policy of careful dissemination of the truth has always characterized the Hermetics, even unto the present day. The Hermetic teachings are to be found in all lands, among all religions, but never identified with any particular country, nor with any particular religious sect. This because of the warning of the ancient teachers against allowing the secret doctrine to become crystallized into a creed. The wisdom of this caution is apparent to all students of history. the ancient occultism of India and Persia degenerated and was largely lost, owing to the fact that the teachers became priests and so mixed theology with philosophy, the result being that the occultism of India and Persia had been gradually lost amidst the mass of religious superstition, cults, creeds, and gods. So it was with ancient Greece and Rome. So it was with the Hermetic teaching of the Gnostics and early Christians, which were lost at the time of Constantine, whose iron hand smothered philosophy with the blanket of theology, losing to the Christian Church that which was its very essence and spirit, and causing it to grope throughout several centuries before it found the way back to its ancient faith. The indications apparent to all careful observers in the 20th century being that the Church is now struggling to get back to its ancient mystic teachings. But there were always a few faithful souls who kept alive the flame, tending it carefully and not allowing its light to become extinguished. And thanks to these staunch hearts and fearless minds, we have the truth still with us. But it is not found in books to any great extent. It has been passed along from master to student, from initiate to hierophant, from lip to ear. When it was written down at all, its meaning was veiled in terms of alchemy and astrology, so that only those possessing the key could read it aright. This was made necessary in order to avoid the persecutions of the theologians of the Middle Ages, who fought the secret doctrine with fire and sword, stake, gibbet, and cross. Even to this day there will be found but few reliable books on the Hermetic philosophy, although there are countless references to it in many books written on various phases of occultism. And yet, the Hermetic philosophy is the only master key which will open all of the doors of these teachings. In the early days, there was a compilation of certain basic Hermetic doctrines passed on from teacher to student, which was known as the Kybalion. The exact significance and meaning of the term having been lost for several centuries. This teaching, however, is known to many to whom it has descended from mouth to ear, on and on throughout the centuries. Its precepts have never been written down or printed so far as we know. It was merely a collection of maxims, axioms, and precepts, which were non-understandable to outsiders, but which were readily understood by students after the axioms, maxims, and precepts had been explained and exemplified by the Hermetic initiates to their neophytes. These teachings really constituted the basic principles of the art of Hermetic alchemy, which, contrary to the general belief, dealt in the mastery of mental forces rather than material elements, the transmutation of one kind of mental vibration into another, instead of the changing of one kind of metal into another. The legends of the Philosopher's Stone, which would turn base metal into gold, was an allegory relating to Hermetic philosophy, readily understood by all students of true Hermeticism. In this little book, of which this is the first lesson, we invite our students to examine into the Hermetic teachings as set forth in the Kybalion, and as explained by ourselves, humble students of the teachings, who, while bearing the title of initiates, are still students at the feet of Hermes, the Master. We herein give you many of the maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion, accompanied by explanations and illustrations which we deem likely to render the teachings more easily comprehended by the modern student, particularly as the original text is purposely veiled in obscure terms. The original maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion are printed herein, in italics, the proper credit being given. Our own work is printed in the regular way in the body of the work. We trust that the many students to whom we now offer this little work will derive as much benefit from the study of its pages as have the many who have gone on before, treading the same path to mastery throughout the centuries that have passed since the times of Hermes Trismegistus, the Master of Masters, the Great. In the words of the Kybalion, where fall the footsteps of the Master, the ears of those ready for his teachings open wide. And when the ears of the students are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. So that according to the teachings, the passage of this book to those ready for the instructions will attract the attention of such as are prepared to receive the teaching. And likewise, when the pupil is ready to receive the truth, Then will this little book come to him or her. Such is the law, the Hermetic principle of cause and effect in its aspect of the law of attraction. Will bring lips and ear together, pupil and book in company. So mote it be. And that is chapter 1. So take what you just heard and think about it for a minute. The end of chapter 1 is particularly of impact to me. And that is essentially, when you are ready, it will present itself to you. When you are ready, the doors will begin to appear. Some may not be open right away. They're just there. They're there. You can see them. You still have some preparation to go through. But you'll see them when you're ready. When you're not ready, they will be as if they don't exist. They talk about casting pearls before swine. And this always makes me cause to think. I'm doing a YouTube channel on Hermetic Philosophy, essentially casting the pearls under the swine, but I don't really think that's true, because you have to actually find me, right? We don't have a lot of followers on this channel, and that's fine. As a very wise person told me a couple weeks ago, the stuff that you do isn't for the masses. So if you have found this, then perhaps you are ready. Perhaps you are ready to delve a little bit deeper into it. So the whole point of chapter 1, what I'd like you just to go back and think on, is your place in this journey. And if you're just starting, enjoy this beginning. Don't rush it. Don't be in a hurry. Things will reveal themselves to you as they need to. And we will be proceeding through the Kybalion. And it's a very easy book. I recommend this in your library. These pieces of wisdom form keystones and cornerstones in your own temples. So thank you for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them below. If you liked it, drop me a like. I look for the discussion. That's why I do these. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Be safe.